This week on The Startup Life.
Man, how do you get a car like that? How do you not work? Why aren't you at work today? It's a Wednesday afternoon. What are you doing? You're going on all these vacations. And ultimately, David saw something in me and invited me to a 3-day boot camp training.
All right, Startup Nation, so let's take flight with Kevin Bupp, founder and CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors. The Startup Life begins now.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Hey Startup Nation, do you enjoy the Startup Life? Now you can let the world know with gear from the show. Choose from the Label Yourself, Make Your Own Luck, and Making Money t-shirts to tell your story of your path of entrepreneurship. Click the link in the show notes to purchase.
All right, Startup Nation, so I hope you're ready to receive some value today. We got a special guest in the building today. We got Mr. Kevin Bupp. What's going on, Kev?
Hi, Dominic. Thanks for having me, bud. Look forward to being here, man.
All righty. Are you ready to pour some knowledge in the Startup Nation today?
I'm looking forward to it.
Let's do it. So, as always, this is Dominic Lawson of the Startup Life Podcast, brought to you by the Binge Podcast Network. So, first things first, man, tell me about your path of entrepreneurship.
Yeah. So the path really began a long time ago. I grew up in very much a blue collar family, and so although we never went without, we surely didn't get everything we wanted as kids, right? Like there were certain toys and things we ultimately wanted that the parents wouldn't buy for us, and we couldn't wait till Christmas sometimes. And so at a young age, I was always looking for ways to make a buck, and that meant mowing grass. I mean, I had chores at home. Mowing grass and taking the trash out and, walking the dog. And so we had an allowance, right? Little things like that. But then that turned into, shoveling snow and mowing grass for the neighbors, making an extra buck there. And then at the age of 12, I got a paper route, started making some more money there. I was still hungry for more. And ultimately learned how to install car stereos and amplifiers and build custom speaker boxes when I was like 13 and 14. And I have an older brother, so he was 6 years older. He had a lot of friends that were into that type of thing. And so I used my parents' garage, turned it into a installation bay on the weekends and made money installing car stereos and that. And ultimately just kept moving forward with different endeavors like that throughout high school. Selling gum, buying it at bulk at like Sam's Club or Costco and selling it at bulk at school and making money that way. And really got my introduction into real estate at the age of 19. That was like the first real business to where I could truly say like, hey, I'm an entrepreneur. Like it's a real business. It's not just me hustling for an extra buck. And ultimately got my start in real estate at 19 and bought my first rental property at the age of 20. I'm 39 now as of this recording, and ultimately fell in love with real estate and have been doing it full time in many different capacities, but as an investor for the last basically 19 years. Along the way, had many other business endeavors, everything from the salon industry to digital marketing to credit repair. I can't even think of there's a number of other ones as well that I'm probably not even thinking of, but had multiple other businesses, but nothing that was ever as lucrative or as one that I had as much passion for as real estate. So that's what we specialize in today. And that's what's brought me to where I'm at.
Got you. I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. So basically came an installation bay at 14, huh? In the parents'
my parents' garage, man. They used to drive them crazy.
I bet. So really quickly, man, I got to ask this because you talked about like, your parents being able to provide for you, to have everything that you need. Maybe not everything you wanted, but everything you needed for sure. And you mentioned maybe certain toys, man, that you weren't able to get. What was that one toy you was like, man, I wish I could have had that when I was a kid? What's that one toy?
Man, it's funny because I've got 2 young boys now. I've got a 2-year-old and a 5-year-old. And my oldest, when he was like 2, we got him, one of those Power Wheels, like, 4-wheelers, they sell Toys R Us. Toys R Us is no longer around. But I remember being a kid, man. And I remember those damn things. They had like the Bigfoot, or they had like the little like Power Wheels Jeeps, and they were just as much then, 30, 5 years ago than they are today. They're a couple $100, and I always wanted one of those things, and I just never got one when I was a little kid. So anyway,
Gotcha. I appreciate that. I asked that because over the holidays, my wife bought me the NES Classic Mini. And so I had a Nintendo as a kid, but like a lot of the games I wasn't able to afford because just like you, we had everything we needed, maybe not everything we wanted. And so I kind of spend my adult life kind of like trying to make up for some of that as much as I can.
Yeah. I was really into like remote control cars and things like that. And they were quite expensive. And so now my son, I get to kind of live vicariously through my oldest.
Absolutely.
And we just got him into, remote control cars and got him a remote control airplane and teach him how to fly that thing. And so I'm kind of reliving those childhood years and filling in the gaps that might have occurred.
I hear that. And the path of entrepreneurship kind of allows you to do that probably a little bit more than you would if it had a typical 9-to-5. So I appreciate you hearing that. Absolutely. So let me ask you this, man. Who or what inspires you as an entrepreneur, man? What's that thing that's like, man, that's kind of cool? And it just kind of helps you get up in the morning. What's that thing that inspires you as an entrepreneur?
Really, it's is number one. I think first and foremost is finding something that you truly love, and I really do love and I enjoy every aspect of our business today. And but in addition to that, the one thing that I probably became fully aware of, and not that I didn't know it existed, but fully aware of was probably about 6 years ago is actually helping others. Now, that doesn't mean that, prior to that, I didn't help anyone and I was selfish. It just means that I wasn't fully aware of the just amazing benefit, both on a personal growth level, but also, as growing a business and being a successful entrepreneur, that helping others, just really putting others first and ensuring that you give value to that next person, that you pass it on. And ultimately, you help enough other people realize their own success, you'll realize it yourself. And I know Zig Ziglar has a saying that goes along those lines, and I always butcher his quote, but ultimately that's it, just really helping others. And I think that's the one thing that has just been a game changer is waking up every day excited to how can I help that next person, find their way in this world. And that gets me jacked up every day, man.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned, man, that you kind of got into real estate at 19 and made your first deal at 20. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. So what pushed you in the real estate direction, man? What gets you so excited about it?
Yeah. I would like to say that I pushed myself, and that's the furthest from the truth, because that wasn't the case. I didn't really, real estate wasn't something that was on my radar. It kind of found me. So I was on real estate's radar. In any event, it was a gentleman by the name of David. David was about 25 years older than I, and he just happened to be dating the mom of the girl that I was dating, right? And that's how I met David. And David was a local real estate investor, and had a completely different background than what I grew up in, as far as, my parents worked 9 to 5, the cars that we drove, my parents dressed, how I dressed, all that. And David just seemed to have a pretty cool lifestyle. He was a really cool guy, had kind of paved his own way, owned a number of rental properties. And again, I was kind of inspired by more so probably initially the material things, just because at that age, I'm like, man, how do you get a car like that? How do you not work? Why aren't you at work today? It's a Wednesday afternoon, what are you doing? You're going on all these vacations. And ultimately, David saw something in me and invited me to a 3-day boot camp training in real estate investing. Again, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, didn't know what I was going to learn during those 3 days. All I knew is that, hey, this guy just offered to take me to a seminar that he paid like $3,000 for. And I need to go because I surely wouldn't be paying that money myself. And I'm going to take advantage of it and see if there's something I can learn here. And I walked away from that 3 days with a newfound passion of really getting myself to the level of some of those folks that I'd met there, and also David, to their success that they had in real estate. And so that was really the introduction to real estate for me. And what I did with that was, I was overwhelmed. I went to these 3 days. I was overwhelmed. I didn't know enough to really go off on my own. And I didn't really have much money. At that time, I was going to school, community college, and I was attending bar part-time in the evening just to make my way. And so I had some money saved up, but I surely didn't have a ton. And ultimately, I went to Dave and I said, how can I add value to your business? Right? How can I be around you more? so that I can learn this business, learn the intricacies of this business, the who, the what, the whys, and also how to not lose money, but make money. Right.
Right. For
And,
sure.
and that's what we did. So he basically accepted my offer, and I did everything and anything, working with David for about a year. And that was in between my classes and tending bar in the evenings. Whenever I wasn't working or in school, I was either at David's office or out in the field with him, doing anything he asked me to do to assist him in his business. And in turn, I learned a ton, and ultimately stepped out and did my first deal on my own about a year later.
Got you. That's fascinating. And thank you for sharing that, because I love hearing stories like that. When you talked about, you were dating a young lady and her mom was dating David, right? And that's kind of how that came to be. It reminds me of an episode we had a few weeks back where we had the U.S. memory champion on the show. And he talked about how he got into, competing with memory and stuff like that. And he was just flipping channels on 2020 one night and just kind of saw it, got fascinated with it. So I love hearing stories like that, man. Thank you for sharing that, Kevin. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
for sure. So look, man, you've closed over like $40 million in real estate transactions over a decade and a half in the game of real estate and stuff like that. And I get that, your industry, real estate, it fluctuates all the time, right? But I want you to tell me about that one deal to where at the time he's like, man, I crushed it. But in retrospect, it's like, you know what? That wasn't a smart move.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have one deal that I can speak to, but what I can speak to is actually a period of time, and that's back during the Great Recession of 2007, 2008.
Right.
I had built up quite a large portfolio in my early 20s. I essentially moved from Pennsylvania, where I grew up, down to Florida when I was 22 years old. And I had been investing at that point for, just going on 2 years, and knew I wanted to, number one, get out of the cold. I wasn't a big fan of the cold weather. And I wanted to go somewhere where the sun was shining and there was the beach and
can't beat Florida.
I love water. I love being on the boat. And anyway, came to Florida, continued on, and just really went gangbusters once I got here. Started building my business, built up quite a large portfolio of single-family rental properties and multi-family apartment buildings. And 2007, 2008 era came like a freaking a blizzard, man. It came, and it came in hot and heavy, and absolutely crushed my hopes and dreams and everything that I had spent so many years building. And essentially, long story short, wiped it out in a matter of 8 months. Completely wiped me out from making a pretty significant monthly cash flow and having a net worth of north of $20 million to basically being worth negative zero, and essentially making no money on a monthly basis, having multiple properties in foreclosure, primary residence in foreclosure, getting my bank accounts garnished. I mean, literally about as bad as you could possibly think of getting. Right. It got about 10 times worse than that. And so it wasn't just one individual deal. It was really a point in time in the real estate cycle, and ultimately I got caught with the wrong timing, just not necessarily fully prepared for just the wrath that was about to ensue. And it was a challenging couple of years, not just 1 year.
Oh, for sure.
It took me about 3.5 years to really get my head back on straight and to get back fully into the game, and get my confidence back, and really move towards rebuilding the platform.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. And I was going to ask about that period between 2007 and 2008. But before I guess we're going to do that a little bit sooner. But before I get to that question, man, you talked about just now. Quick follow up. You talked about how it took you about 3.5 years to kind of get your confidence back. This, that, and the other. Tell me about that first 6 months to a year, man. Like, what was that point? Like, tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, I'm trying to really think back. I've tried to truly
block that out,
away that part of my life.
Right, fair enough.
But there's some I'll speak to there were some very positive things that even though the world was ending for me financially, there were some incredibly positive things that were also happening simultaneously. It's amazing how the universe and how God kind of puts kind of does a gut check to you. But then on the other side, like there's if you're willing to look and open your eyes up, there's positive things shining through as well, and you got to be willing to open your eyes and see them. anyway, that's actually when I met, literally about 3 weeks before I defaulted on basically 85% of the loans I had. That's when I met who is now my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the mother to my children. So that happened right at that really challenging point in my life. But as far as, the 6 months or so following that period of time,
right.
The one thing that my wife was very positive, or my girlfriend at the time was very positive to my life. But the one thing that really helped me just, I guess push through was I was really into health and fitness. And I knew that was the one thing that I had control over was, how I felt. And I knew that obviously if you drink a ton, you eat like crap, you feel like crap, right? Whatever goes in comes out. And so I became even more conscious of my health and my personal fitness at that point, because I felt like, if I just make my body and my mind as strong as possible, then ultimately this, I'll be able to push through these challenging situations that are going to come at me. Because it wasn't just a matter of like, hey, I was in default and, I'm going to get a couple calls from a bank and it's going to be all over. It's like, this is going to be a long-term process to work through this. And it's going to be lots of judgments, lots of court dates, lots of knocks on the doors, lots of phone calls. And I just focused on my health and fitness. I focused on being personally happy. And, another thing that was a good learning experience and a positive thing that came out of it, which I didn't really see at the time, and this is other than meeting my wife, was leading up until 2008, I had just amazing credit. I could literally go sign on any size loan. I had many credit cards I had established for many years where I had $100,000+ credit lines. And, it was never a question whether or not I could get credit. It was like, how much do I want? Well, when everything came crashing down, a lot of my credit card companies, although I never defaulted on any of my credit card or consumer debt, they started seeing that I was defaulting on mortgages and they started shutting off my credit cards completely, like literally not just lowering the limits, but shutting them off completely. And so I went from having hundreds of thousands of dollars of open credit availability to like $1,500, no joke. There's 2 credit cards that kept me, Bank of America and Discover, and one had a $500 limit, the other had a $1,000 limit. And so what I had to learn to do very quickly was live on the money that I had and not be able to rely on credit for anything at all. Like literally, go back to a cash in hand type situation. So that taught me to just live a completely different lifestyle. Not that I never over leveraged, but when you can only pay for things in cash, you start really questioning, the need for that particular item, or you really start playing ahead to, for example, like a car. Like you need a new car. Like you can't just go sign a loan for a $40,000 or $50,000 car. Like it's not possible. Like that is not possible anymore. You better have the cash, all of it, and that better be what you want to spend that $40,000 or $50,000 on, is that car. Is that the smartest decision to make at this point in time? And it was a very positive experience to come out of that. I'm a much more conservative investor nowadays because of it. Some might see a downside to that, but I don't. I very much see it as a very cautious, a very considerate of the current cycle that we're in, and also the types of investments that we're putting our money into. So for sure.
Thank you for sharing that. And I love that you talked about controlling what you can control. I think that's a very important piece, Startup Nation, when we talk about our path to entrepreneurship. But you talked about that 2007, 2008 period. I actually want to ask you something about that, man. So it probably wasn't just you. It was a lot of people to where things kind of went upside down in the real estate space during that period, in the economy and our recession and stuff like that. So what are some lessons that we can take away from 2007, 2008 in the real estate space that can help in the future if it were to happen again?
Yeah, I mean, as far as real estate is concerned, I look back and I surely look back many different times and say, to ask myself, what would I have done differently? What could I have done to avoid that? And although there were many smarter people than I that also had, had been through cycles before, that also got crushed and lost their wealth, even with that being said, a few of the things that I learned personally was to, we were always cash flow investors. Like everything we always buy is about we look at each piece of real estate as its own individual business and how much cash will that produce on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, and put money in our pocket, right? Like we don't speculate. We don't buy just based on appreciation. We want cash flow coming in our pocket each and every month. And with that being said, one of the things that I do today with every single investment we make, which we didn't do so much back then, is we run every new deal that we underwrite through a sensitivity analysis.
Okay.
And that sensitivity analysis will have different situations or scenarios to where, what kind of debt do we get today on it? Assuming that, our initial business plan A is to, refinance in 3 years, pull X amount of dollars out, get our investors 80% of their capital back, and then ultimately put a new loan in place at this interest rate in year 3. And this is what our cash flows are going to look like moving forward. Well, what happens if when we go to do a refinance in year 3, we can't pull all that cash out and get our investors paid back? What if interest rates go up 1%? What if they go up 2%? What does that deal look like? Can we still hit our long-term strategy? That's plan B. And then we look at a plan C and then a plan D, and we try to figure out what the worst case scenario might look like. And then we look at the deal as a whole and say, can we get comfortable if this ultimately would play out as a worst case scenario? And then, try to find that comfortable ground of, we're good with this deal, no matter what happens or no matter what we think might happen in the next 5 years, we still can hit our numbers. We still can get our investors, the return that they're looking for in their capital, no matter what the market does. And so that's one thing I can't tell you I did, back in, prior to 2007, 2008.
For sure.
But surely, there's deals that we walk away from now that make sense today. They literally make sense today, where we're at today. But there was too much risk in not knowing what the next 3, 4, or 5 years could bring, that we decided not to do the deals. Now, someone else might buy them and they might turn out, on the positive side. But, I'll give you an example. There's a deal up in New York that we just recently passed on, that it was on private septic system. And it was also a deal that we would have to get local debt on because of the size of it. And local debt typically carries like a 5-year balloon, meaning that in 5 years, you've got to get new debt put in place on it. Now, that's one of the risks. That's the first risk, because we don't know what the capital markets are going to look like 4 years from now when we have to start going through that refinance process. This deal makes sense today based on the 4.75 interest rate I can get on it. But at assuming 5 years from now, rates could be at 6.5%. The deal gets a lot tighter. Okay. That wasn't enough for us to kill the deal. We were still comfortable enough in that deal. The second layer of challenge was this park was on, this mobile home park was on septic systems. And that particular county really doesn't like septic systems. And some of these septic systems were very old. Some were new, some were old. The old ones made up about half of the community. And that was about 30 mobile homes. And so there was a lot of revenue. And what happened is, if one of those septics would go bad, I don't want to get into too many weeds here about septic systems because that's not what your show's about, but we wouldn't be able to replace it. The county would not let us replace it. And that means we would lose a revenue unit because that mobile home would have to move off the lot and move out of the park. And so we knew that the septic systems were old enough to where ultimately they're going to fail over time. They might last 5 years, they might last 15 years, but they're kind of at the end of their economic life. And if we lost 5 units over the next 5 years, it would absolutely kill our numbers. And I thought that was realistic. Would it happen? Maybe not, but could it happen? Very realistic that it could. And paired with the potential rise of interest rates, we didn't feel confident in the deal. It just wasn't worth the risk for us. Today, the numbers look great. 5 years, we probably wouldn't be as excited about it if it didn't go as planned. And so we decided to pass. Someone else ultimately bought it for the same price that we had it under contract for. Maybe they didn't do a sensitivity analysis. Maybe they didn't know as much as we knew, but we dig really deep to determine what it looks like today, but also what does the future look like for that deal, and will it economically meet our end investment criteria?
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And I actually don't mind the part about talking about septic systems, because one of the things we talk about on the Startup Life is that, even when you're in a particular space of a business or something like that, there are all these, auxiliary pieces that we need to know about as well. So if you're in real estate, then clearly that septic part, you have to kind of discuss and know about a little bit. And you probably pick up some knowledge about septic systems that you really didn't anticipate, but that's kind of the life of an entrepreneur. So I actually do appreciate that part. Kevin, and since we're talking about mobile home parks and stuff like that, I know that that's one of those things that you're really passionate about. That's your niche, especially there at Sunrise Capital Investments or whatever, right? So let's talk about that a little bit. So why have you been able to kind of really make your mark in the mobile home sector? How have you found success there?
Sure, sure. Well, that's a great question. And, it's not where we started. We started buying single family residential homes many years ago, then bought apartment complexes. I've owned lots of other types of commercial real estate over the years. And ultimately was, again, just like a lot of things in my life, it was kind of an accident that we stumbled upon mobile home parks. And I was introduced to this space back in 2011, 2012 period of time, just by a mutual friend introduced me to a guy that happened to own mobile home communities. And I like meeting new people. I mean, your net worth is your network. I'm a firm believer in that. And so I went into this lunch meeting with this individual named Randy that owned mobile home parks with no interest whatsoever in this niche. I literally just wanted to go meet someone new that ultimately was a successful real estate investor. I had no interest in learning really what he did as a business or learning more about his space, which is mobile home parks. And after that 2-hour meeting, I walked away saying, there's something to this. I need to learn more. And I want to test this theory out as far as, why he thought mobile home parks were so much better than all the other different real estate asset classes out there. And that's not necessarily the case, but that's what his opinion was. And I like to either prove or disprove a concept when I find something that's of interest or intriguing to me. And so that's ultimately what I did. This is back in 2012. I bought our first mobile home community just to test it out and see if we can make some money with it. Made some great money on that first deal. Still own that one today. And bought a second, bought a third, bought a fourth, and just again started seeing that I could essentially turn this into a very lucrative business. And it was something that I could put my focus and energy on, which I'm a big fan of. I like picking one thing and just kind of mastering it and building a business out of it, not going in a million different directions. And that's what's really brought us to today. I mean, I bought a first couple mobile home parks with my own money or with just one partner. And then we got to the point to where, we couldn't necessarily fund future investments just by ourselves with our limited capital resources. And so we formed a company and started raising capital under the name of Sunrise Capital Investors. And now we have, over 100 investors that basically have partnered with us over the years in the numerous assets that we own today. So we're currently in 13 different states. We've got assets in 13 different states, and we're buying all across the country right now. So, and it's all mobile home parks.
Gotcha. And Startup Nation, if that's something that you're interested in, you can look at sunrisecapitalinvestors.com. We have the link there in the show notes for easy access. So, Kevin, I want to ask you this because, when you talk about mobile home parks, it kind of gets a bad rap from time to time because of the clientele that kind of, it draws a little bit. It's like maybe not necessarily the same clientele as somebody who's looking for an apartment in Manhattan, right? Since you kind of mentioned New York earlier. So, how are you able to service those clients and still have a profitable venture, man?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, first and foremost, I'll debunk the myth there as far as, a challenging tenant-based to service or client-based to service.
For sure.
I like to give the comparison. Everyone knows, everyone at one point or another probably has lived in an apartment or, knows somebody that lives in an apartment complex, right? In any different city that Dominic, either that you live in or any of your listeners live in, you probably know the area of town that's got the really rough apartments. Like you don't even want to go there during the day. It's just like drug red and full of crime. And then there's other newer built apartments, right? Like the new, like really high end. They got dog park, they got swimming pools. I mean, they service and cater to white collar folks, six-figure earners. And then you got kind of everything in between. You got the apartment complexes that are just good hardworking folks, the working class. They're in good areas, good school districts, aren't bad, aren't like the A-class type stuff, but they're right in the middle. The same thing exists in our space. I mean, you've got some really rough trailer parks that are just full of the wrong clientele. You want to run from as fast as possible. And you got some really nice ones. I mean, I'm talking. There's mobile home parks, for example, here in Florida where we live they're surely not affordable. They're very A-class. A lot of them are second homes for snowbirds that come down from up north. They've got palm tree lined streets. They've got swimming pools. They've got shuffleboard. They've got activity director. The list goes on and on. And then you got everything that kind of falls in the middle, which is geared towards that working class, just like the apartments I told you about. So with that being said, we typically, we cater to those working class folks that want the best for their kids. They want to be in good school districts. They want to live in a clean, safe, and quiet environment. And so, we've got screening processes in place to basically keep out the riffraff. And only allow the good folks in that want to live in a good, clean community. And so servicing our clientele is not challenging. I mean, obviously there's always that one, there's always that one individual that kind of like squeezes through the system and works their way in, but we work them out pretty quickly. So our tenant base is not challenging whatsoever to service or not, I should say, not any more challenging than that might live in an apartment complex or that might rent a single family home from somebody. So very, very good people that we cater to. Folks that, again, just want to work hard. They want to pave the way for their family.
For sure. Thank you for sharing that. And so, man, how do you find mobile home parks to purchase? Like, you just go through like a Google search, like Craigslist. Like, what does that prospecting process look like for you?
Yeah, we do a bunch of proprietary things here, but
okay.
You can go through brokers. So, for example, like a real estate agent or real estate broker, there's multiple brokers out there that specialize in selling this particular type of investment, mobile home parks. So that's one way to go. They're all across the country. You can go to, there's a couple listing websites. LoopNet.com is probably the most well-known commercial real estate listing website. Inside that website is like a subsection, which is for mobile home parks. So you can find parks for sale there. There's another website called mobilehomeparkstore.com, which is a listing site. But what we do, or what we found over the years, is that we really enjoy and we get better deals and find greater value in dealing directly with an owner and buying directly from an owner than we do when there's a broker involved or before the property might get listed out to the general marketplace.
That makes sense. That makes complete sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And so most of the stuff we buy is direct to owner, and we do a lot of different marketing strategies to get to them. We have a full-time person in our office that cold calls, literally day after day, cold calls, mobile home park operators like ourselves, and basically, initiates a dialogue with them, and hopefully we'll get them on the day when they decide they want to sell their property. We do a lot of direct mail. And we do a lot of paid advertising, and so we drive a lot of the leads doing direct to owner marketing. So that's how we buy most of our properties, and it's done quite well for us.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And Startup Nation, the link to all those websites that Kevin just mentioned is there in the show notes for easy access. Kevin, I want to shift gears just a little bit and just kind of talk about real estate as kind of in the future a little bit. So an article that was released in the Richmond Times Dispatch as of this recording, probably maybe about 15, 16 hours ago, said that millennials and Gen Z are driving trends in commercial real estate. And it's due in large part to millennials and the generation that comes behind them, Gen Z, are driving trends such as co-working space and demand for smaller apartments with lots of commercial amenities in walkable urban areas. Have you noticed this? And how do you see these generations who have seemed to disrupt all other industries disrupt real estate as well?
Yeah, I would say that we don't necessarily cater to, the generations that you just mentioned there.
Okay.
I think a lot of those generations are looking for more urban core type places to live, places that are truly walkable to restaurants, and the co-working movement is absolutely huge. But our normal clientele base it's more of a suburban nature. So they're on the, not necessarily the outskirts of a town, but they're outside of the urban core market. They're basically just like a single family neighborhood would be. That's very similar in location to where our communities might exist. And we've got a different a variety of communities that we offer. Some communities are just very basic workforce housing, meaning that the folks that live there, they really want the most affordable option for them. They want it to be safe, they want it to be clean, but they'd rather have a cheaper price than to pay more and have amenities like a swimming pool and a gym and a co-working space and things of that nature. They just want a very inexpensive place to raise their families. And that's for the most part who we're actually catering to, our families as well. Not necessarily the generation that you spoke to there.
Gotcha.
We do have some higher end communities that might have like clubhouses and gyms and things of that nature. But again, still not necessarily the clientele you spoke to there. But with that being said, there is a subsection of our industry that is catered to the Gen Ys and Gen X. Is that the two that we're speaking to?
Yeah, Gen Y and Gen Z. Yeah,
Gen Z. I'm sorry, Gen
no worries.
Y and Gen Z.
No worries.
The tiny house movement is pretty big, and it's still a trend, and it's still kind of pushing forward and it's growing. There are a number of older mobile home communities that maybe when they were built 60, 70 years ago, they weren't necessarily in the path of progress. They weren't, inside of the city limits of a given area.
Right.
But 70 years later, they are, right? Like they're literally like kind of like it could be the eyesore. They're kind of in an area that is, prime for redevelopment, prime for a higher and better use. And what I've seen a lot of folks do, and this is not our business model, but this is surely an opportunity that exists in our space. It's just not in line with our exact business model.
For sure.
Is a lot of folks will take these older communities and they'll basically take out the old rundown mobile homes or trailers and basically put these tiny houses back in place. Because a tiny house is considered an RV or a mobile home. And essentially, create a community, a tiny house community that is much more trendy, caters to the generations that we're speaking of much more than our typical community might. And so there's a lot of opportunity in our space to cater to that crowd, the folks that they don't need a lot of space. They're looking more for shared workspaces than they are to have a dedicated home office, right? They don't want a whole bedroom dedicated to a home office. Right. They'd rather go to a cafe up the road or to a co-working space and actually go to a more social environment to do their work on their laptop. They don't need a place at home to do so. And they don't need a lot of space because really they don't want to stay underneath that roof. They just want to sleep there. Other than that, they want to be out in the restaurant. They want to be hanging out with their friends and being in that more urban core environment. So with that being said, again, our current business model doesn't cater to Gen Y or Gen Z, but there are aspects of our business that surely do.
Gotcha. I guess I just wanted to kind of get your take on, that space in general, as a real estate investor and a person who's in that space, to kind of point out that like you do pay attention, not just to your, current business model, but like all across the real estate spectrum and stuff like that. So,
well, yeah, absolutely. One of the big shifts that's occurring is the percentage, generally speaking, of folks that, have a desire to be a homeowner, right? I mean, back 30, 40 years ago, like that was a thing, right? Live the American dream and everyone strived to actually own a home. And it's really made a huge shift. And I think a lot of the Gen Y and the Gen Zers see maybe what their parents might have gone through or hear of the stories of what their parents have gone through. And they necessarily don't want to be tied down to a home. They don't want to be tied down to a mortgage. A lot of them are actually, that generation, they're thinking about marriage way later on in life, right? They're not worried about that today. They're not worried about being stuck in one city. They want to float around. They want flexibility, and they want to rent. They don't have an interest in owning. And so we're fully aware of that. Again, it's a different clientele than what we serve, but the real estate market in general, at least the residential side of it, those that are catering towards renters are fully aware. And I think there's been major shifts that have occurred within real estate industry due to the changes in habits that are taking place with these different generations. So. For sure. Thank you for sharing that. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. How you like being on the Startup Life so far, Kevin? No, it's absolutely awesome, Dominic. You do an awesome job, man.
All right, Startup Nation. So I hope you're getting great value from Kevin's content, but we got to pay a few bills. Once again, my name is Dominic Lawson. Listen to the Startup Life podcast, and it is powered by the Binge Podcast Network. Hey business owner, the Startup Life reach is growing. Wouldn't you like your business to grow with it? Reach out to us to advertise on the Startup Life. You can reach us at 901-857-4818, or you can email me at dominic@askalsolutions.com. I mean, don't get me wrong, like this is a great music to have break on, but wouldn't this break sound a lot better with the same music but your business being advertised on it? Need more content from the Startup Life, you say? You can now sign up for the Startup Life All Access Pass on the Binge Podcast Network's Patreon page. There is exclusive content written by yours truly, video content where I share even more of my business philosophies, and whatever crazy content I can think of out of that crazy head of mine. And at only $5 a month, yeah, $5 a month, this is more content for you, Startup Nation, to really get ahead of your competition. So instead of upsizing that meal at your favorite fast food joint, you can now invest in yourself on your path to entrepreneurship. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. All right, Startup Nation, so let's continue. So man, tell us about Sunrise Capital Investors, man. Tell us all about your company.
Yeah, so we specialize in mobile home park investments, as we've been talking about here.
Right.
And we are a investment firm that essentially works with accredited investors to essentially partner with them on acquisitions, new acquisitions. So we buy mobile home parks all across the country, and we essentially, a lot of times we'll buy things that are somewhat distressed or haven't been run efficiently, so they have some challenges within the operations, and we'll take those mobile home parks and turn them into something great, something that that runs efficiently, that has a very concise operation to it. And essentially, with these partners that invest with us, we'll essentially give them a nice return on their capital. We handle the day-to-day operations. We handle finding the deals, basically closing on the deals, putting the debt in place in the deals, A to Z, and our partners essentially enjoy a passive income stream as a result of it. So we get our hands dirty, we roll up our sleeves, and all of our partners, investors, these accredited investors essentially can diversify their investments, and they can diversify it into the mobile home park space and rely on an operator with a track record, someone that's been there and done that and has done it many different times, which is us.
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. So I saw an interesting graphic on your website, the investment life cycle. Share that with Startup Nation and what that's all about.
Yeah, it's just really the approach we take with each one of our mobile home parks that we purchase. It just kind of runs you through I would say it's a typical life cycle. It's not every deal that runs through that exact same formula. But in any event, it kind of shows the life cycle to our investors. So they get into a deal with us, and ultimately the cycle that their capital goes through, from us acquiring the deal to us, adding value, raising rents, to us refinancing, to us doing a cash out with that refinance, getting some of their initial investor capital back to them or all of it back to them. And then ultimately, we're a long-term investment firm. And so everything we buy, we don't buy with the intent of buying it and then flipping it just in a couple of years. We do have the end goal to get our investor capital back to them as fast as possible. But after we get that initial investor capital back to them, it's really all about this long-term relationship that we have. They still retain their ownership in our deals, and we run off into the sunset together, enjoying passive income streams for many years to come. So that's essentially what we try to highlight there, showing the investors that might have an interest in investing with our company exactly what's going to happen with their capital, and really what our ultimate goal is over maybe like the first 5 years of any individual deal.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. So, man, you have quite the team there at Sunrise. You got yourself, Charles, Brian, and your wife, Joanna. Tell us a little bit about your team and brag on them a little bit.
Yeah, I need to update the website because our team's way bigger than what it shows there on the website. Yeah. So, and we got a lot more. It's funny. We're actually rebuilding that site right now. So just kind of FYI for all the listeners, we own a lot more properties than what it reflect on that website. Okay. And our team is much larger. So, in addition to what's shown on the website as far as our team, for sure. We also have 5 other staff members here in-house, and then we employ a litany of folks out in the field that actually work in our individual communities. So, I mean, in addition to what you see on the website there, we've got a couple different acquisitions folks on our team. So in addition to myself, which I kind of head up the acquisition side, we've got 2 junior acquisition team members. We've got a director of operations that's here in-house that oversees all of our asset management. We got a junior operations staff member. We've got a transactional coordinator that kind of handles our deals. So once we get them in the contract, she carries it all the way to closing and coordinates with the sellers, with the attorneys, with the title companies, and all that stuff that goes on. We've got a marketing specialist in-house, and we also have a social media person in-house that essentially helps us grow our social presence, helps with I've got 2 different podcasts. They really help us grow the podcast network, and which ultimately drives a lot of the capital that comes into our business. So I think I named everybody. I think I've got everyone nailed. Gotcha. Yeah. I think we've got 9 or 10 full-time employees here.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And so, Kevin, all throughout this episode, one thing I really like is that, like, you're not just telling us about real estate, but you're also kind of teaching us, some of the subtleties in that space. And so you brought up the podcast. So I kind of want to talk about that now. So you do have a podcast, the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, which, you and your guests kind of, from time to time, help people gain more vital real estate knowledge. So what's your ultimate goal with the show, man? I've seen you've been in the top 100 of iTunes a couple of times, man. So what's the ultimate goal with the show?
Yeah, I'll kind of start from the beginning with the show. Sure. I've been listening to podcasts for longer than people even knew what a podcast was, right? I mean, seriously, I've been listening to podcasts for probably 12 years. I mean, long time. I used to drive way more than what I do now. Gotcha. And so I'd always be listening to shows. And very quickly, at least back then, I quickly ran out of what I felt to be quality content or relevant content to me, as far as business content, and that specifically to real estate. There was a number of real estate podcasts out there, but most of them were focused on residential real estate investing. And that wasn't, at that point, I was already transitioned into commercial real estate, and it just wasn't filling that void, right? And so, a couple of years went by, and I'm like, man, someone's got to start a commercial real estate investing podcast. And ultimately no one did. And so I did. I said, someone needs to do this. And so I bought the equipment. It took me about a year to actually start it. My wife threatened to sell the equipment if I didn't start the podcast. And what it really came down to was like, there was two things. I went into it with two different kind of mindsets. It wasn't about monetizing. It wasn't about making money. It was about, number one, adding value to folks. I knew that if I was out there looking for that type of content, there was thousands of other folks out there looking for the same content.
I hear that.
So I wanted to add value to people, and I wanted to show them there's a bigger, better way than just residential investments. Commercial real estate is really the way to build just huge wealth as a real estate investor. So I wanted to share that with the world. In addition to that, I wanted to interview a number of folks that probably wouldn't take the time of day to speak with me otherwise. And so I've had some just huge players on the show, guys that owned, multi-billion-dollar portfolios in Chicago and New York. I've had some guys that are just, bigger than life on the show that surely would have never taken the time of day to speak with me. So I got to ask questions that, sitting down for coffee for an hour with one of these big heavy hitters, whatever my heart desires, I got to ask them. And I did that on the show. And so I got to share that with the world. So that was the initial kind of push me to do it, is just to have fun with it. Me educate myself, me educate my listeners. And it turned into something even bigger than that. It's really turned into kind of a life of its own. And we've helped out tens of thousands of people. We've interviewed just some awesome folks in the show. And I've had a lot of fun with it. And it's really helped us grow our business as well. In addition to the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast, about 3 years ago, we launched a mobile home park specific podcast. And that was due to another void. There was no one out there really speaking or teaching about this niche. And so we saw the void. We had a lot of people reaching out to us asking about it, and we figured we would answer those questions and give that value back in the form of a podcast. So we've been doing that show now for over 2 years. I think it's going on 3 years here soon. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Got you. Thank you for sharing that. And Startup Nation, the links for both of those podcasts are there in the show notes for easy access to check out Kevin's amazing content. So, Kevin, man, let me ask you this, man, because, not only are you a serial entrepreneur, but you're the founder of a few charitable organizations, runningforbrews.com and 72 Hours to Key West, that helps families during the holidays, man. Why is philanthropy important to you?
Again, it goes back to that old saying of, you help enough other you help enough other folks get what they want. Ultimately, you'll get what you want in return. And so, there's, I think it's every individual, human being's life duty to help the next person in line, right? To help others and really put others first. And, both of those organizations, basically were a result of the 2008 crash. Like literally both of those were formed during those years following that were very challenging times in my life. And both of them, again, they're kind of, they revolve around helping others, but they also revolve around health and fitness. And so runningforbrews.com, that started off as kind of a way. I'm a big runner. Well, I used to be, I guess. I'm a big runner, and I enjoy craft beer, right? That's one of my things. I enjoy a good craft beer. I enjoy going to breweries. And I wanted to start a social event that met once a week at a local brewery to where we can go out, run a 5K, be healthy, meet others, be social, and enjoy a good craft beer afterwards. Ultimately, I started that just with the intent of having fun and meeting others. And it really turned into something to where we need to expand this across the country, and we need to monetize it. And also we need to find a giving angle of this business as well. And so it turned into that. It's the largest social running organization in the country. We've got 38 different chapters and I think 7 or 8 different states. And we've done multiple different food drives and charitable endeavors in each one of those chapters, and have helped a lot of people. Lots of marriages have come about as a result of this weekly running.
I hear that.
So it's been pretty cool. But anyway, that was during that time in my life where I was really trying to just do something I enjoyed real estate, but I didn't enjoy it when things were really bad, right? And allowed me to get my mind off of it and focus on bigger and better things. And then the Key West ride, 72 Hours to Key West, is just that as well. We did the first event in 2010, and that is that was a way for me to help fund a local charity that's near and dear to my heart. It's a good friend of mine, Rod Cleef. He's got a podcast as well, but he basically feeds thousands of families every year, and he's been doing it for many, many years. He had challenges during the real estate recession as well, and went from feeding thousands of families every year during the holidays to just a few hundred, which is still amazing. But ultimately, his charity got affected dearly because he used to self-fund it. And so I started that bike ride as a way to take one of my hobbies, which is cycling. I enjoy riding bikes and being around others that do as well, and essentially raise money to help, take it from a couple hundred families we fed every year to back up to a couple thousand. And we launched that event in 2010. We do it every year. We sell out every year. Last year, we donated $40,000 to Rod's charity, which ultimately fed, I think, about 4,000 families here.
Nice, very
over
nice.
the holidays. So I think we've now donated over $200,000 over the years we've been doing the event. And again, it's all about helping, helping the other person and helping everyone around you and giving back.
For sure. And Startup Nation, if that's something that you want to give and help Kevin out on his endeavor, you can go to both of those websites. Both of those links are there in the show notes for easy access. And I did hear about, man, you're pretty active running triathlons and marathons, hiking, biking, and everything between. So I did kind of gather that in my research for sure. I also heard, man, you're a bit of a wine and beer snob, man. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it's just, as I mentioned, I started running for brews so that I could also, get my craft beer fix on a weekly basis.
For sure.
And then my wife's a big, I met my wife and she's really into wine. And so her and I really enjoy going out to, like Napa or out to wine country once a year. And it just, we enjoy wine. I don't know how else to put it other than we enjoy wine. I would say I'm a wine snob. I'm probably more of a beer snob than a wine snob. But
Fair enough.
We enjoy a good glass of red wine and enjoy spending time out in wine country when possible.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. Kevin, I think all entrepreneurs have a superpower, man. What's yours and why?
I think just helping others, and I truly enjoy doing that. I don't know if that's a superpower. I think it's I don't know if it's a gift, because I think everyone can help the next person, right? Everyone's got that in their heart. They just got to, find it sometimes and open it up to the world. So I think that's it, man. I really enjoy that. And I see the direct impact that I've been able to have on, hundreds or thousands of people. And I feel like that's the reason why I've been put on this earth.
Gotcha. Thank you for sharing that. And before we ask the last question, we would just want to say thank you so much for coming on the Startup Life podcast, brought to you by the Binge Podcast Network. You've brought amazing value to myself, my listeners, Startup Nation, and we really appreciate you definitely coming on the show. But at this point in time, I'm going to give the microphone to you, because there's an entrepreneur out there, man, they're on the ropes, they're afraid to start, or they're afraid to keep going because they've had a few rough spots in their business, man. Give them some words of motivation to tell them to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is probably so cliche, but it really is just, taking that first step of action. But just before you take that first step, knowing that there's going to be challenges along the way. There's going to be bumps and bruises, and just expect it. But one of the things that's always helped me is surrounding myself with others that are not just doing what I wanted to do, but doing it really well, that have ultimately succeeded in whatever respective niche or business that you intend to go towards, right, or intend to be in. Right. And don't surround yourself with others that are at the same stage as you, because otherwise you're all going to fail together, right? Surround yourself by those that have been there, have done that, have found great success in whatever business that is that you're moving towards. So I think that's one of the big things, is that just there's going to be bumps and bruises. Expect it, and surround yourself by a really good team or a really good support network, and that's ultimately going to help pull you out of those downtimes, those ebbs and flows. They're going to pull you back up and help you move forward. And so I think that's really the advice I give. It's just actually, I got one other piece of advice I'd like to give. I think this is important. This applies to real estate. It applies to whatever you're going to tackle in life as far as a business, is get focused. Get granular focus. Pick the one, whether it's a certain type of business or a certain asset class in real estate, but pick that focus and master it, and try to tune out all the other noise, because there's a million and one different ways to make money as a business owner, many different types of startups, many different assets of real estate. There's a million and one different ways, probably more than that, to make money. Pick the one that you feel best aligns with you and your personality and your core values, and just focus on it, master it, and give yourself the time necessary to actually truly master that craft, whatever it might be. It doesn't mean that you can't, go a different path years down the road once you've already found success in that one, but focus on it. Give yourself the time and just try to, again, block out all that other noise. So
I hear that. Thank you for sharing that. You heard that, Startup Nation. Get granular focus. I love that. I definitely love that. So that's going to wrap up this session of the Startup Life, man. Did you enjoy being on the show, Kevin?
Oh, man, it was an absolute blast, Dominic. It really was.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. All right, Startup Nation.
So here's my final take. I love Kevin's path to entrepreneurship. It's a lot like how we talked about in the episode, a lot like Chester's, where he was dating a young lady. That young lady's mom was dating somebody, and it just kind of just happened that way. And sometimes your path just happens accidentally that way, and that's okay. Sometimes it just takes something to come out of nowhere to spark that idea, to spark that brain, to fuel your path to entrepreneurship. Another thing I want to point out about Kevin's story is that I love how when he talks about the charities and helping people, I think that's an important part of the entrepreneurial story. Look, when you're on the path to entrepreneurship, your customers, they buy into you, they invest in you. So I think it's actually really important to invest back into that customer base, invest back into not necessarily directly to the customer base, but something into the community that you can really provide value in. I think that's how you provide value back to your customer base. But all in all, I think Kevin's story is very valuable to learn from, and I hope you got that from this episode. If you want to let us know what you think about the show, have an idea for a show topic, or like to advertise on our show, please send us a message on the Startup Life Podcast Facebook page. And while you are there, like and follow our page as well. It's a way for us to engage with you, Startup Nation, and really grow our community. The link is here in the show notes. Subscribe to the show, as it can now be heard on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, or whatever your favorite platform to get your podcast on. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts and you find our content valuable, please give us a 5-star rating, as it will help us climb the charts and help more people find our show. Also, don't forget to sign up for the Startup Life All Access Pass to get exclusive content. This is exclusively on the Binge Podcast Network's Patreon page. And hey, if you have an idea, be about that life. The Startup Life. What's going on, Startup Nation? Probably here for more content, huh? All right, wait no further.
Also, when I said that when we want to expose them to social entrepreneurship, it's like we're not even hoping for everyone to become an entrepreneur. And while I think I love entrepreneurship and everything, I think everyone's a change maker. I think that's also our vision for Fulfill and everything. And so it's whether you become an entrepreneur or a doctor or a lawyer or whatever it is that you want to be, our goal is really to make sure that people have that mindset, that impactful mindset of wanting to make a difference in what they do. And that's really the goal at the end of the day.
That Startup Nation is Tiffany Yao, change maker and Philadelphian. So go ahead and subscribe to the Startup Life Podcast right now on all of your major podcast platforms. So that way, when that episode is available, it'll be right there waiting for you. So until then, Startup Nation, you got a company to grow. Get out of here.